This is the Breeze Romper by Samantha Marie Design. I do my binding and my neckline a little bit differently, so let's get into it. So for this pattern, I only printed the size that I needed. If you want to know how to do that, go back to my other videos and check out my printing pattern hack video. I also have a video on how to assemble these if you're a beginner and you're not quite sure how. You should have one main bodice piece, your neck binding piece, and 2 straps. So total, you will have 4 bodices that are cut 2 opposites, 2 of your straps, and then 2 neck binding pieces. I'm going to be doing the shorts version, but I went ahead and cut out the pants version. So if I ever want to make the shorts, all I have to do is fold that pattern piece up. You will see on the pattern that it says to cut on the dashed lines for the shorts, and then your longer line is for the pants. Cutting opposites can be tricky, so what I do is I fold my fabric in half, and then I will lay my pattern piece on top. You're not cutting on the fold, you're just folding your fabric in half, and then I'll lay my pattern piece on like this and cut around it, and that will give me 2 opposites because I folded it in half. You don't have to do this, it's just what's easier for me. You will know if you cut your opposites correctly if they lay on top of each other, right sides together, and line up perfectly. That's what I'm going to do now, is lay my 2 opposite bodices right sides together, and this is either going to be your front or your back bodice. Now we're going to pin that right here on the side, and your front and back bodice are going to be exactly the same, so you don't have to worry about which one is the front and which one is the back. So this is where we're going to sew on those bodice pieces, and we're going to repeat that for our other bodice. So after you sew that part on both of your bodices, when you open it up, that will now be your full either front or back bodice, and it will look like this. So now I do my binding a little bit differently. So now what I'm going to do is take my neck binding, which is this piece right here from the pattern, and I'm going to take that fabric and I'm going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, so that my print is facing up. Then I take the end of that neck binding piece, and that is what I am going to pin to the top corner on my front bodice, and I'm going to pin that straight across just like this. So this is it again, a little bit closer up. So we're going to open up our bodice, and then we're going to take our neck binding piece, we're going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, and then you're going to start at the top corner on your bodice and just pin there, and then pin this straight across, and we're going to sew this on straight across. Once those are both pinned on, we're just going to serge or sew this on the top. After you're done, this is what that should look like. Now you will need to hem your pants or your shorts at a 1/2 inch hem. So you can either do that now before you sew your bodices together or after you sew them together. You're going to lay your front and back bodice pieces right sides together, and now we're going to sew down both sides. After you do that, it's going to be time to add your straps or your binding. So this is how I do mine. I take my binding straps and fold them in half long ways, and then I sew or serge that short end shut to close my strap. After I sew that, I fold it in half just like this, and then I will put a pin directly across from that seam. After I pin that, I'll open up the strap and lay my pin on top of my seam and put 2 more pins on the ends. So now what I'm going to do with my bodice inside out is I am going to take my strap and I'm going to line up the seam on my strap with the inside side seam of my bodice. So you're going to pin that right here, and then after you have that pinned, now your other 2 pins are going to go where your neck binding piece is on both your front and back bodice. Now this is not even right now. We are going to adjust this as we're sewing it on, and I will show you closer up. So I'm going to line up my seam on my band with the seam on the inside of my bodice here. So I'm just going to pin that together. And then for my other 2 pins, I'm just going to kind of use those as a guide. So I am just going to pin this pin to the top of my neckband here. It's not exactly going to line up because when we go to stretch or sew this band on, it's going to be a little too short of a distance. So we are just using this as a guide, and then as I start sewing, I'm going to readjust this. So I'm going to do that for both sides with my 2 other pins, and then we're going to sew this and I'm going to show you what I do next. Okay, now when we're sewing this on, what I do is I will take this and wrap it around my serger on my arm here, and I'm going to start where my seam is lining up with the seam on my bodice right here. So we're just going to get this positioned and underneath my presser foot, and this is where we're going to start, and then we're going to make some adjustments. So after you've got that under and all lined up, we're just going to serge a little bit, and then I'm going to come to my pin and I'm going to take that out. And now I'm just going to take the top of my neckband and I'm going to lay it up against my fabric so that I'm not stretching this a ton. So after I already started serging, I just take the rest of that bodice piece and make sure it's laying nice and flat. And then I start sewing, and when you come up to the neckband piece, make sure that you have your seam underneath here pushed down so that it's not flipped up like this as you're sewing. And then there's a small corner right here. I just cut that off, and then I keep serging all the way around until I come up to my next pin, and now I'm going to adjust the other neckline here. So just like I did with the first one, I take that pin out and then I lay this flush or flat with my band so that there's minimal stretch happening, so that it just lays nice and flat and the length of whatever the bodice is. So I'm not stretching a ton, I'm just laying it flat with that band, and I'm just going to serge this on. So after you have that serged on, this is what it will look like. So now from here, we're going to do the other side. After you have both of those straps sewed on, this is what it will look like. And I just lay mine together inside out and just make sure that my straps and my necklines are matching up. And they both matched up pretty well. I didn't have to make any other adjustments. Now with my bodice inside out, now we're going to prepare our straps. So what I do is I will push this bottom seam up, and then I will take the top and we're going to fold that down to where it is meeting that seam that we just pushed up. So just like that, so that they meet up together. And then we're going to fold that top down again over top of that seam, just to kind of hide it. Then you can put a pin in this just to keep it down, and you're going to keep doing this for your entire strap. After you're finished, it should look something like this, and you want to make sure that your strap is the same width all the way around, so make any adjustments if you need to. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to top stitch this down. So I start at my side seam on my bodice, and I just use a long straight stitch, and I will start top stitching my whole strap down. And as you're doing this, just try to stay as close to the edge on the strap as you can, just making sure that you're going through both layers of your strap on both sides. After you do both of your straps, you will need to finish either your pants or your shorts. So I'm doing the shorts version, and I'm going to fold my shorts up about a 1/2 inch, and then I'm gonna pin all the way around this. So I literally just use my tape measure, I measure it, and then I will put a few pins in. I also use the lines on my sewing machine as I am doing this, but it's just a little bit easier for me if I go ahead and pin it first. And then I will use a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine. So when I hem, I use the widest zigzag stitch setting that I can use, and we're gonna do this for both of our legs. When you're all finished, this is what it should look like. If you have any questions, please just let me know down in the comments, or if you have a pattern you want me to make a video on, I'd be more than happy to help. Hit the like button and subscribe.